As part of my Anatomy of Bias series, I think it's worth exploring the type of bias I've personally experienced the most, that of being discriminated against as a woman in science. As part of this, I would like to discuss my first tenure track faculty job from which I was let go. I was not granted tenure. It was shocking and traumatic. It took me 4 years to land on my feet. I still feel some of the trauma from that experience, truth be told, and it's especially because I never really knew why I was fired. I have enough distance from these events. It's been about 10 years. I have finally landed on my feet, and I think I can be relatively objective about what happened back then. The reason this falls into the category where I suspect bias was involved, and perhaps specifically against me as a woman, is that another man who was by definition less competent than me was given tenure the following year after my tenure bid was declined. So let's first discuss the job and why it is that I would make such a rude statement with such confidence. At this school, it was a small liberal arts college. There were high expectations of all faculty members, especially if you were tenure track. It usually would take about 6 years to get tenure. You'd work for 6 years and then you'd be granted tenure, and then you'd also be granted a promotion at that time, pretty standard. So at this school, tenure track faculty members had to fulfill 5 different career components. Highest priority was given to teaching. Student evaluations seemed to be the biggest component of this. And then the second priority was service to the school, such as serving on committees. And then scholarship, or the publication of some kind of research project. Then faculty development, such as attending seminars and meetings to better your teaching skills or keep up to date in your field of interest. And then there was actually a 5th one, but I can't remember what it was. Having 5 categories is a lot. Most schools only have 3. It's usually teaching, scholarship, and service. But 5 was a lot, and the standard feedback for me personally at my yearly review is something like, okay, you did better this year with your scholarship, but you need to work on your faculty development, for example. There was always some kind of like, you're not doing this well enough. I'm not sure. I was never really given feedback that I was doing well, but that's probably because I wasn't. Looking back, I was drowning. I was put on 3 committees within my first month of working at this school. They just really needed help. I had 41 academic advisees by my second year, each of the 41 had to have an individual meeting each semester to plan their classes for the following semester. I also developed 4 new classes during my time there. During my 6 years, I developed 4 new classes, which takes a lot of work. Every student in the biology program, I'm a biology professor, so every student in the program had to develop and implement a research project. So often I would have 5 to 10 students under my tutelage in this category, and this is high maintenance, time intensive work. Those students need a lot of hand holding. You have to teach them techniques. You have to, help them read through papers and all kinds of stuff like that. Now, in my personal life, I lived more than an hour from campus. I had 2 babies during the 6 years. I was never given a pregnancy leave. I only learned afterward from colleagues at other institutions that it was pretty standard for faculty to receive 80% pay for an entire semester off after a pregnancy. This was never offered to me, but I honestly didn't ask for it. I didn't feel like my department could absorb my absence for a semester. I was already teaching overload every semester, usually one entire additional class. So a standard teaching load would be 12 credits and I'd be teaching 16 or 17 credits. And then I also thought, well, if I take a semester away, what will happen to my students' ongoing research projects and so on? Anyway, that's a glimpse into this job. It was just a lot of work, and that was kind of what it was about, just a lot of work. It was looking back now, especially now that I'm at an institution where, by the way, I'm paid more, and it's just a much better position. The school has a much better reputation. It just every aspect of what I have going now is better. Now I kind of realized that I was just overexerted in every single capacity. They were stretching me. So When it came to submitting my tenure packet, I honestly thought I was a shoo-in. I'd never heard of anyone getting denied tenure at this school. And frankly, they really needed me. I felt I occupied an essential role at the school. Looking back, I was doing nothing particularly well because I was absolutely torn up by the high expectations. And it was almost an impossible workload. I'm not really making excuses, but this is just how it was. Like, you had to work. Probably there were times when you had to work 70 hours a week. You just had to. There was no, if you wanted to do anything well, you had to be working lots and lots and lots of hours. So when I found out my tenure decision, the letter was left in my mailbox. This was actually the way that tenure was always rewarded or denied at this school. Everyone talked about going and getting their letter, 9 a.m. in the morning after it was put in their mailbox. My husband actually drove me to the school that day. I ran in to get my letter and came back to the car to read it together. I fully expected that we'd be celebrating, but of course we didn't. The letter was a brief statement. It said the board did not grant me tenure, and there was no explanation. It was literally like 2 sentences long. I couldn't believe my eyes. My husband and I were both completely shaken up and just trying to understand why and how. And there was a meeting scheduled for later that morning with the provost and the dean and myself. And I went to the meeting honestly thinking there had been a mistake. Nope, no mistake. And the only reason they told me was that there were some semesters where my teaching did not meet expectations. I was flabbergasted. That's as much as I know about the story of why I was fired. And the next year, a male faculty member in my division was awarded tenure. Let's talk about him. So this person was my dear friend. I don't have anything against him personally. I'm happy for him that his career plans worked out. I'm going to say some things about him that are less than flattering, but I only say these things to demonstrate the wrongness of the decision, simply stating facts. He and I were co-chairs of a highly demanding committee. I would say we both contributed equally. We both served on other committees as well. So in the service category, we were equal. Remember, the categories are service, scholarship, teaching competence, and then the other two, I can't remember. They're really not as important at most other institutions. In the scholarship committee, in the scholarship category, I was demonstrably more competent. My colleague did not have an active research program going, certainly not one that involved students. Whereas my research project was active, ongoing. I had up to 10 students brought through my program each year. I traveled and brought students and their research to academic meetings. This is a big deal in undergrad, by the way. This is, going to an actual meeting is like it's a big up for students to put on their resume and so on. And in fact, one of my students won the best poster award competition against about 30 other undergraduate posters at one of the meetings we went to. And in the most important category, teaching competence, I was hands down better than my colleague. Without going into details, there were quantitative and qualitative metrics of instructional quality that were transparent in our division. Everyone could see everybody else's. And he was consistently lower than me every semester. It's rude to say it that way, but that's just how it was. I was just a better teacher. I've always been a good teacher. I was a better teacher. Anyone laying out his tenure packet next to mine, who was judging objectively, would state that my packet was stronger by a mile. So there was some kind of subjective judgment in denying me tenure and granting it to him, and it's been that subjectivity that's kind of torn me up all these years. This is long enough, so I won't go into even more details, but there was some evidence that I was denied based on a small number of people simply judging me in a particular way. Unfortunately, they were in positions of influence and decision-making. So forgive me for assessing the situation and concluding that at least part of the subjectivity was due to sexism. I do firmly believe that played a part. women are held to a different standard in the workplace, and maybe especially in the world of science.